Hey, this is Dr. Graves with another in the video tutorial series for Introduction to Human Geography. This video is about the different morphologies or shapes of African American ghettos in the United States. So you should read through this, and then later you can come down to the link and open the map. You may or may not have to log in, so there's a secondary video there for those who want to log in. Click here and this should bring you to the ArcGIS Online site. I'm going to try to do this without signing in. I believe all you have to do is click on Open in Map Viewer. And what you will be brought to is a plain base map of census tracts in Wayne County, Michigan, which is where Detroit is. You may need to click on the Layers tool here. Note that there's a red point for the Central Business District, so this area is downtown Detroit. So we're going to do a couple of things with Wayne County in particular before we get fully into calculating the level of segregation using something called the Dissimilarity Index. So in the meantime, click on the three dots here to open the Wayne County, Michigan properties. Click on Show Table. This is annoying that this properties window appears all the time, but we want to focus on the attribute table. Recall that each of these rows of data in the attribute table is dynamically linked with one of the census tracts. And so by doing this, you can sort of filter, zoom in to selected tracks, and then bring up various bits of information about each of the tracks. But what we're going to do first is to note that the number of records that are in this table, which corresponds to the number of census tracts that are in that county. And so I believe that there may be a question on the quiz about that. So you may want to pause and answer that question. The next question asks you what the total population of Wayne County is in 2010, and you would gather that information from this column. But I'm going to gather it from the next column so you can learn this on your own. One way of doing that is to click on the three dots next to population 2010 and select information. A window will pop up for any of the columns of data, any of the variables, and you can scroll down to the bottom where the statistics, so the total number of white people is 951,936 in 2010. So take a moment and answer the similar question for Pop 2010. Another way to get this information is to click on the Configure Chart. So I'm going to dismiss the table, click on Configure Charts, and add a chart. And a histogram is a very useful tool for understanding the distribution of data in a spreadsheet or in a data set. The number that we're going to look for is population 210. And here we have a distribution chart. I'm going to expand it by collapsing the layers. And this histogram shows that some of the 10 of the census tracts appear to have no people in it, and then there's one way over here that looks like it has 7,888 people. We can put some overlays on here, so click on Normal Distribution. This is what a perfectly normally distributed group of census tracts would look like. They would follow this curve perfectly. There in blue is the average, the mean, and then the median, which is similar to an average, but helps account for skewing. There's not much skewing in the data, so they are close. And then click on Standard Deviation. Standard Deviation shows up in gray lines, so kind of hard to see. Click on this dot here and then maybe make it red so it's easier to see. What you need to know is that the standard deviation, we scroll down here, which is this figure here, represents sort of the average dispersion around the statistical mean. So it's sort of the average of the average. And so you would read this as the average census tract is roughly 3,000 people, give or take 1,300 people. 68% of the census tracts fall inside or between one standard deviation above the average and one standard deviation below. So if we collapse that, we see that these census tracts that are highlighted are really sort of in the middle, and those that are further away in terms of standard deviation are highly unusual. Notice that there is sort of a ratio of the mean to the standard deviation, and so the standard deviation is about 1/2 of the mean. And so this is a reasonable and normal distribution that is what statisticians look for, because it's quite common for distributions of data to look like this. So examine the statistics and answer a couple of questions. Our next step is to make a choropleth map of the data that shows up here. And so just in order to clear the selection, click here on clear selection, which is kind of the eraser button, and we can dismiss this graphic. The next thing we want to do is to understand the distribution of black people in Wayne County. So click on Styles, click on Field, and one way we could map black people in the county is just by clicking on black and clicking OK. And this is good enough for our purposes right here. And we see sort of this checkerboard pattern, but what this is just a map of total number of black people per census tract, and it tells only partly the story, because some of these districts or some of these census tracts could be almost everybody's black in this census tract or whatever, but there's just very few, so it doesn't appear to be a black neighborhood. And so really what we want to do is click on the styles and remove black and replace that with the percentage black map. So click on percent black, click add, and this is a much better map, but we're going to refine it just a little bit. So click style options and then click or turn on expand classify data. We want to change the number of classes to 5 and change the classification method to equal interval. And now we have in the darkest blue all those neighborhoods that are above 80% black, and in the lightest color 20% black or less. And so click done a couple of times. And what you should notice in this county is that in some areas, including here at the border between this black neighborhood, which if we click on it, we find that it's 94% black, but when you cross this Tireman Avenue and click in this census tract, you find that it's only 2.3% black. And so this is not completely common to northern cities, but it is far more common in northern Midwestern cities than elsewhere, where the black neighborhoods are really black and then the white neighborhoods tend to be really white, and there just aren't very many neighborhoods like the one we see here or the one that we see here that are in an intermediate color. So one of the ways that we would want to analyze this pattern is through a segregation index, and you can see it on the map with your eyes that Detroit and Wayne County here is quite segregated. But the other way to do it is to calculate what's called the dissimilarity index. We'll do that first by configuring a chart, and we're going to add a new chart. Once again, it's a histogram. Click on that, and the number this time is % black. You can check normal distribution, which almost makes no sense in this case, and then the mean. And so the mean shows up as 47.86, which says this is the average neighborhood. But as you can see from the histogram, there's almost no neighborhoods that are average, which then tells us that the median is probably also somewhat useless, and that the standard deviation is really what's telling the story. The standard deviation, and again we can make it red lines on the graphic, is nearly as large as the mean. And so what that tells you is that the mean is useless. You could say the mean's about 50, give or take 50. And so I believe there's a question that you can answer at this point. So you may want to pause and answer that question. So we're going to dismiss this once again. And this time we're going to go back over to Wayne County, Michigan, click on the 3 dots and open the table. We're going to scroll to the right where I have already calculated the dissimilarity index. In your exercise, it has the formula for doing this. It's not that difficult. Your task is to click on the 3 dots and pull up information. At the bottom is something where you will see the sum, and you'll get a number for dissimilarity index, and that is the answer to the next question. And it represents a percentage of white people and black people that would have to move in order to make the county completely integrated. So answer that question. The remainder of the exercise has you repeat this process with Harris County. So we're going to open Harris County from the layers and we're going to zoom to it. This is Houston, Texas, and here is the pattern that you see. You'll notice that the pattern of black residents, which is here, the legend is again, it's over 80% black in the darkest red, but notice there are more census tracts in an intermediate color. Once again, you can go to configure charts if you want, add a histogram, and this is not for Wayne County. We have the wrong thing. We need Harris County activated, and here we can add a chart, histogram, and once again the dissimilarity index. The sum of the dissimilarity index is the answer to the question regarding how segregated is Harris County. You'll do this once again where you zoom to Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. It has yet a third pattern of black residents, and once again make sure you have it activated. Add the chart, histogram, select disindex, look for the sum as you answer the remaining questions in this exercise. This concludes this video tutorial.